As the endgame destination in Dune Awakening, the Deep Desert generally takes quite a lot of time to reach, but it's technically possible to enter the DD as soon as you spawn in on a new character, so long as you have an ornithopter. This got me thinking, how far can you get if you completely skip all of Haga Basin? Let's find out. I'm about to head to the Deep Desert on a fresh server with nothing on my level 0 character to put my resourcefulness and game knowledge to the test. I've got 7 days to go from surviving to thriving. No handouts, no funny business. Let's get stuck in. Lore frogs will be pleased to know that the biggest issue right off the bat in the Deep Desert is water, and unless you plan a route well, you'll die of dehydration multiple times. Your water levels drain incredibly quick here, so getting on top of H2O is my first priority. At the same time, I'm going to gather as much copper as I can so I can craft a sandbike. As soon as I spawn in, I make a beeline to the Sarkadar Promise. This is a weird location since it promises 2 resources it never has, EMPs and MSFs. However, it does have a singular chest you can loot that has a guaranteed tier 5 green weapon or outfit. Right off the bat, I managed to get my hands on an Adept Karpov 38. Not BIS, but definitely an above average find. This spawn is part of the reason why I opted for the middle DD entrance, despite the left hand side having a higher density of caves and wrecks. I'll likely visit the west and east sides anyway for intelligence in the research stations, but A4 to A6 is where I'm spending the first few hours of this challenge. After building a basic shelter and getting the essentials in place, I researched the blood bag and extractor so I could get some water rolling from testing station 93 corpses. It also has a few water receptacles inside that I'll happily utilise. Interestingly enough, there are static bodies in this station that you can extract blood from, but you get a fraction of what you receive from enemies killed normally. Testing station 93 can spawn high-end vehicle parts, and that could save me some time down the road. I received a Scoutthopter engine and a buggy PSU. Both of these are appreciated, and I will make use of them. I then made a run for a shipwreck about 1 kilometer west and found a pistol early on that's great for combat, although as I slowly made my way through the enemies, I heard the ominous sound of a thopter. This is a PvP zone, and I'm hardly in a position to be PvPing. I made a mad dash for the grand prize and exited post-haste. Once I was safe, I asserted my dominance with a few pot shots at the player who tried to best me. Not this time, pal. A quick stop at a cave, followed by some copper farming not long after. I was soon back to my base of operations, and I'd done enough to reach my first major milestone, the Sandbike. Armed with 250 inventory slots, I was about to wreak havoc on the Deep Desert. This was my ticket to the big leagues. I even had a Mark V welding torch looted earlier to put it together with. A true chariot fit for a king. Alas, with the scorching sun at its zenith and my water supplies dwindling, I made another pass at the local research station to wait for better conditions to use my new engine. As the sun set, I knew what I had to do next. Prepare for the worst. More copper was the play, so as the moons rose, I went ore hunting. I even managed to bang out a few survey probes, which really do help with character experience and by proxy, intel points. After I banked enough copper to craft another sandbike, it was time to set out and seek my future. Thus ends Act 1, for it's time to me to enter the Iron Age. For reasons unbeknownst to me, iron ore in the Deep Desert doesn't spawn in rows A's or B, but you can find some islands with it if you venture north. Sadly, the DD is big. Really big. And without a Thopter, I'm in for quite the adventure to get my first taste of iron. I figured that water was going to be a very big concern on this trip, so I prepared as best I could and packed some surveying ammunition too for the character XP. Now you might not know this, but the Deep Desert has quicksand, and yeah, getting stuck in it if I'm not paying attention is a huge risk. I'm also going to have to be strategic with how I hop from Rock Island to Rock Island. A sandworm death would set me back bigly. The psychological damage alone would be catastrophic. After waiting for another night cycle, I filled up on water and took my chances. Sadly, things didn't go as planned. I searched 6 sections of the DD to no avail, and then tragedy struck. This wasn't completely my fault. Like me, you might not know that the quicksand in the Deep Desert is actually entirely predictable, and it's used to split up 3x3 squares. There are 9 in total, and if you want to transition from one to the other, you'll need to fly over them. A sandbike won't make it. This also cuts off the western and eastern ends of the A row. This is a technical limitation of the Deep Desert, and as much as I hate having to do it, I decided to use an ornithopter just to bridge this specific gap. I still used my sandbike as much as I could for this journey, so while I was cheating, it was cheating as little as possible. I still hadn't located the iron ore spawn after more searching. So I asked in Discord for some help overnight, and I was told that there was one singular island this week with iron ore. It was in H3, which was as close to a worst case scenario as things can get. After my death, I decided to clear both sides of the deep desert for the intel points and some things to sell. Before heading to bed, I put up some listings and was pleased to return the next morning with over 500,000 Solari. It's not time to trivialize this challenge quite yet with best in slot equipment, but a few tools seemed fair to me to acquire. Channeling my inner Australian was the next step. I knew there was a whole bunch of iron ore in the middle of the desert, and it had my name on it. The whole journey there and back took over an hour, but it was a massive victory, and I'm glad that I did it. Though one thing is for sure, I wasn't going to be doing this again on a bike. Up until this point, water has been such a limiting factor. My trip to gather iron ore literally used around 70% of what I had. So now I was back at base, it was time to turn my attention toward making this problem go away. Additionally, I wanted to expand my base out. I was actually happy with the location for now, but it needed work. So I set off to future-proof the structure with my upcoming plans regarding water. See, aluminium is going to be a lot easier to gather than iron, and we need it for a few thopter pieces, but processing it requires a lot of water. Since I've got that covered to some degree, putting together the buggy was my next task. Clearing dozens of labs yesterday meant that I had almost all of the full buggy ready to go. Just the treads and hull were required to be crafted, and a Mark V cutter rate should make water the bottleneck on the aluminium, not the ore. The first thing I did with my aluminium was sort out my storage situation. Until now, I'd been stuffing everything into the small storage containers, which only have space for 10 items. The 45 capacity of the aluminium tier storage I'm using now feels so good in comparison. My base looks a lot cleaner when all is said and done. With some dropped ornithopter pieces and hundreds of aluminium now to my name, I'm really close to crafting my first airborne vehicle. My philosophy with this run thus far has been to farm as much as I can myself, and if I need anything not accessible in the deep desert, I buy it. The engine and generator were covered, as well as 2 wings, but sadly these are Mark V, and those require 700 intel to craft. Quite far away from the 300 intel I've currently spent. Mark IV wings are worse, but this challenge was never really supposed to be easy. Additionally, crafting these requires industrial pumps, which are available in only one place in the deep desert: crashed ships. I found 2 spawns quite close to my shack and farmed them a couple of times to get the pumps. Plus I've been recycling long and short blades I've dropped from shipwrecks and stations for the carbide scraps and diamondine dust. It was actually possible for me to farm my own cobalt paste too. There are aerithrite caves that spawn in the deep desert, and as luck would have it, one was really close to my base. As much as I've enjoyed the Sandbike, it's time for me to take this character to the next level. My first thopter is the key to the deep desert, and I'm going to start with a full clear of the A-row to see what the XP levels are like, and if hitting 700 intel is a reasonable goal. Annoyingly, Dune Awakening's XP table gives way more intelligence at later levels and for comparatively far less XP, so the start of a leveling grind here is really quite rough. For example, going from 31 to 32 and 91 to 92 equally requires 600 experience, but the former level up gives 10 intel, whereas the latter level up gives 40. Naturally, I want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so since I'm planning to go ahead and wipe out so many enemies, it only made sense to combine this with gathering as much water as possible, because down the road, it's my ticket to the big bucks. I crafted a Mark V filter extractor and 3 mass correct blood bags. With 55% extraction efficiency, I'm getting 5.5 litres of blood per body, which translates to 2.2 litres of water via the improved purifiers. Note that as much as I'd like death steals, it would require me to complete some quests in Haga Basin, and since this method was reasonably viable, I decided against completing it. I also visited the buried testing stations further into the deep desert. These enemies are harder, and not all of the bases had intel, but combined with scans and discovery XP, it got me closer to my 700 intel target. I also found a large number of downed ships, providing me with a decent amount of materials that I wouldn't be able to acquire anywhere else. I also found out that clearing enemies wasn't the quickest method of XP. Instead, it's picking up loose plants, scrap, and ore. The ship near my base was the perfect place for this, and although it was boring, I could average 10 levels per hour utilizing this method. I put something on my second monitor and got to work. It was nice seeing my intel levels slowly increase. Now that the thopter was done, Project Plastanium was next. I'd already explored the ins and outs of spice melange production in my previous videos, so I wanted to know what the ore side of the deep desert was like. After securing my initial loads of T6 ore, It was time to go pro. Again, no death steals meant relying on wind traps, and since each Plastanium piece requires 1250 water, I had to be smart about making it my main priority. I built a new base as close as I could to the edge of the PvP area and started shipping everything over to my new factory. I'd actually almost run out of Solari, but an overnight selling blitz coupled with someone selling off Melange at a highly discounted rate meant that I was able to get everything online pretty quickly. By the time I had the funds for a large ore refinery, there were 72 hours until the Coriolis storm hit. Realistically, I wanted to be out of the DD a few hours before then, but I was happy to aim for 8 filters per wind trap, which would equal 64 hours of water. Wind traps yield 2,700 water per hour, so each was going to bring in 172,800 water. Since Plastanium was selling for around 5,000 Solari each, I wanted to aim for 10 million Solari by the time I got out. That would be 2,000 crafts or 2.5 million water. 15 wind traps would suffice. I farmed up another load of iron ore and had enough carbon to secure the wind traps, but the filters meant some more aluminium harvesting. Thankfully, the new ore refinery made it maximally efficient to get all of this online. Most of the pain of crafting Plastanium isn't titanium or stravidium, it's the water. The large refinery was a priority for crafting efficiency, but immediately after that I went for Mark 6 wings on my Thopter. This took my cruising speed up about 10%, and since the rest of the game was going to be me running around, it really felt worth it. I ended up with 20 wind traps and farmed up the ore I needed relatively quickly. All that was left to do was let time do its thing and sell my ores. I did consider putting together a carrier to try some solo spice farming, but I instead invested my time fiddling around with a few things for my next video. I also wanted to take a bit of a break from the game, and just letting my base generate the water I needed while I was out and about felt great. I also figured it was a good idea for me to liquidate as much as I could over the last few days. So I chucked a bunch of stuff up for sale and was quite impressed with the Solari I managed to build up. Here's a look at some of the stuff I sold and for how much. Most of the income did come from Plastanium and the discounted melange being resold for profit, but industrial pumps, irradiated slag, spice-infused ingots, and various blueprints had non-trivial value too. Consider selling these on your own server if you're hard up for cash. I still have a few things to sell, but I wanted to get this video out. I didn't feel like waiting for the sales to complete. I'm sitting on millions of Solari right now, which is enough to buy anything I'd ever want. Not bad for a fresh start account to reach in a week. I'm slightly irked that this wasn't a pure run. It's technically possible to do this challenge without any trade whatsoever and hit endgame. I didn't know about buried treasure, but this can yield your aluminium, although you'd also need a starting 3x3 block that has erythrite, iron, and carbon in it. The chances are low, but if this ever does happen, I might run it back and try and do it as a pure Iron Man. I was confident I'd be able to hit the endgame, but with better planning, I could have had my Plastanium factory online a lot sooner. I wasted a bunch of time trying to get XP from various sources when gathering from the floor was the best method. This was a deeply unenjoyable way to level, but a League of Legends tournament was running at the same time that I was farming, so it was tolerable. This challenge was fun, but it really emphasized the gliding simulator element of this game that I'd like to see done away with sooner rather than later. It gave me a lot of time to edit clips and work on my script, as well as come up with some new ideas for some videos, but for everyone else, it's a massive snooze fest that gets boring very quickly. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe for more Dune Awakening content in future.